Well, we're live now, so thank you. Welcome everybody to the Southland Civil Defence Emergency Management Group Joint Committee meeting. There is a few new faces around the room, so maybe before we dive into the agenda proper, maybe if I could go around the table and just ask everyone just to state their name and their organisation, and that will just help people understand who's at the table today.
Kia ora, Michael Day, Chief Executive in Invercargill City Council.
Tracy Fraser, Emergency Management Southland, Principal Advisor covering the Acting Manager role.
Neville Phillips, School District Council.
Morena Nikki Coates, School District Councillor.
Morning, Mike Galuli, National Emergency Management Agency, filling in for Katie McRae.
Lucy Hicks, GM Integrated Catchment Management here at Environment Southland, Acting Group Controller for Emergency Management Southland.
Kia koutou, Angie Hopkinson, Manawhina Emergency Facilitator out of Te Amarama, supporting the Manawhina representation.
Morena koutou, Koraki Dallas Tokuangawe, representing the Kaluna Runaka, and that and filling in for Evelyn Cobb.
Kia ora, Tom Campbell, Mayor of Invercargill.
Morning, Christine Menzies, Deputy Mayor, Southland District Council.
Morning, Grant Emery, Deputy Mayor of Invercargill City Council.
Morning all, Uguti Tupra, Southland District Council, filling in for Cameron.
I'm Phil Morrison, I'm Deputy Chair at the Regional Council and I'm chairing this group. So thank you everyone. We'll start with apologies. Having introduced everyone, there's a sense there is the odd gap at the table and people filling in for others. The apologies we have so far, and I'm just referring to this, Katie McRae from NEMA and Mike filling in there. So that's one apology. Evelyn Cook and Ricky filling in there, and Cameron McIntosh, Vibuti filling in there. Are there any other apologies? Oh,
So just note the apology of Mayor Rob Scott. I think he put his apology in when this meeting was organised initially, said he was unable to be present.
thank you.
And also apology from Ben Bell from GDC, which I'll be his representative.
Yep. Thank you. Can I have someone who would prepare to move to accept those apologies? So we'll go Grant and seconded by Tom. Yeah. Thank you. Now, there is quite an agenda today. Please don't panic. A large number of the pages that are reflected in a quite extensive agenda pack for the group plan, which we will be attending to in due course. But first of all, if we can look to the minutes of the previous meeting and look to accept those.
I have one amendment to make, and that's in regards to Reverend Evelyn Cook, to show when she's listed as present that she's representing Ngāi Tahu ki Murihiku, and also down at the bottom under the confirmation of minutes to correct it there to show that she was representing Ngāi Tahu ki Murihiku.
Thank you. Is there any other amendments or that we wanted to flag to those minutes? Someone says to move that those are an accurate record of that meeting with those amendments. Thank you, Tom. Someone to second that? All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Were there any issues arising from those minutes that people wanted to attend to now that feel there may not be an opportunity to later in under the other agenda items in the Awesome, thank you. We will then move on to the next agenda item is the action sheet. I thought I might just pause for a moment as chair to just mention a couple of things that have occurred in the last 2 months. So just want to flag before we dive in that in recent months we've had the EMS workshop on the 19th of February. Thank you to all those who supported that. It was incredibly useful, and I think it was a really important step in sustaining a shared and collective understanding of both the challenges and the opportunities for EMS in the months and years ahead. On the 20th of February, the 3 mayors, 4 chief executives and myself had the opportunity to meet in person with the preferred candidate for the role of EMS manager and group controller. I'd say that was a successful engagement, and all of us left, or all those who attended, left with an increased confidence that the candidate was a great fit for the role. And so then on the 11th of March, we were able to announce with some pleasure that Phil Mackay has been appointed to the new EMS and group controller appointment. Phil is due to start with us on the 25th of May, so 2 months away yet. We will need to make sure we don't overwhelm him with a to-do list on arrival. We will have a prioritised list of things for him to attend to and discuss that with him to make sure he understands what they might be. On the 25th of February, I had the opportunity to present the Environment's Southland submission on to the Governance and Administration Select Committee, who were considering the Emergency Management Bill number 2. And then, of course, 4 weeks ago, the United States and Israel launched coordinated airstrikes on Iranian targets, and that has triggered a bit of a disruption to global supply chains and the petrochemical energy industry. And it seems likely to be continue with a number of cascading impacts globally, not the least being disruptions to global trade and supply chains. And that may yet be something that impacts us regionally, and we may talk more about what the flow-on effects might be later in the meeting. So there's just a bit of an overview commentary on a few things that have been occurring in recent weeks. And of course, we will watch with interest how that Emergency Management Bill number 2 progresses through the legislation. On that basis then, moving to agenda item 4, which is the action sheet. And I'm going to turn to Tracy to perhaps lead the discussion on this one. Tracy.
Thank you. We have several things listed here, but we have also changed the formatting, you'll notice, on the action sheet, so it's a bit more clear where things are at. So for the building maintenance, it's included later in the pack today. The 4.4 CDM foundational overview, the operational subcommittee has actually come together and workshopped a little on the joint agreement, and have agreed that they will meet with a more regular frequency to assess what parts they play as the governance on operational matters, and as part of those extra meetings, and I guess with Phil coming as well, so that the new manager is set up to succeed, they will put a few more things in place. And this will include a review of the training program, as mentioned in the joint agreement, which is what this comment referred to, is about the uneven commitment and resourcing across councils. And then they will return to KEG any development on any changes or processes that will be put in place to help assist the EMS team with the consistency across the councils attending training programs. The item 5.3, I'll speak to later in the report. The finance report is included in this report. The action sheet comments. So Councillor Menzies asked that the review of the last 12 months worth of meetings. We have actually done that. We have it in draft form. By and large, vast majority of all those actions have actually subsequently come to the table and been closed off. There was a few that are slightly outstanding, but it's also in the wording. And so what we are asking is, when a action is brought to the table, that there is clarity that it is actually a directed action and that it is moved for recording as an action. Some of the comments we're sort of mulling over at the moment is that it's been discussed in the minutes as, oh, a good idea would be this. And so, yes, it may be a good idea, but is it something directed for us to actually use resourcing on to achieve? And so we'll tidy up the last 2 or 3 pieces with those, to get clarity on whether it was just an idea or was a preferred action for us to enter in the action sheet. But also, if there's going to be several actions noted, for us to have an understanding of the priority of those actions to be achieved, so we can work out what resourcing we need to allocate to that. So all in all, for yourself at least, Councillor Menzies, 99% are definitely taken care of, and we'll just clarify the last few. And if they need to be brought to the action sheet, they'll come to the next meeting. and or if we can close them off, they'll be included in the reports. And then we have the business plan, finances. So there is finances included in this report. The annual budget specific to the budget, the business plan was requested. Due to staffing constraints for the finance team, we weren't able to produce it for this paper, but I will circulate it. And we'll keep the actions on here until it's definitely closed. And then once it's been presented to this table as closed, it will come off the next. So that will be acknowledged in the next paper. So.
Tracy, just to clarify, you spoke about that review of the previous 12 months worth of minutes, and I have a sense that there is some potential tasks or actions, but it's yet to be clarified if they are actions to commit to or expressed as good ideas. You will bring that list to the KEG next for their discussion and consideration before it comes to, okay, that would be helpful. I think if KEG were able to cast an eye over that and give their thoughts on and they may also have a greater sense of understanding where those ideas or comments or potential actions may have had their origin in previous meetings. Okay. Are there any other questions on the existing action sheet as it currently stands? Yeah, Christine.
Thank you, Chair. You clarified one of my questions, so that's good, and we'll see that at the next meeting. And the other was, it's also positive to see the operational group sort of up and running with regular meetings. How does that feed through in terms of any matters, and should they, to the joint committee?
I've got a view of how it should feed through, but I see Lucy might be prepared to offer a comment on that.
Thank you, Chair. So historically, the way we'd gotten into a fairly good rhythm with the operating subcommittee and having a formal report after those meetings that would then feed through to the KEG. So those meetings would be a summary of what was discussed, decisions made, things that were outstanding and further direction being sought. Over the last wee while, we've lost our rhythm with that, and so the last meeting of the operating subcommittee, we were very clear that we need more regular meetings and more rigor and more transparency in terms of what those discussions are, how those notes are taken, and then how we take them up through to the KEG at the very least. If there are things that are outside of the KEG delegation, they'd need to come here too.
So to summarise then, at a governance level, if we have an interest, we could look to the KEG papers, or if it needs to be elevated to governance attention, it'll come from KEG to us from OS, the operational group.
Yeah, through you, Chair, we could also do a kind of status report, which wouldn't necessarily, it would be probably mostly the noting, but it would also be elements that KEG have highlighted need escalation through to yourselves.
Okay.
But
through you, Mr. Chair, just a little bit broadening of the context of what Lucy's just said. At the last operational subcommittee, actually we asked for a session to be held about what exactly is the role of the operational subcommittee as per the joint agreement. We reached an understanding that it was perhaps not working completely as per what the agreement is, and it needs to have a more hands-on role in terms of management. And out of that, we still haven't landed that as an operating subcommittee, that we just need to tighten up on that, come up with the terms of reference, and following on from that will be the reporting. There will be things that will need to come to KEG, and then further decisions that will need to come to group, like Lucy's mentioned. So there is a bit more work for us to do in that space, and I think it would be worthwhile for both KEG and group to see how that operating subcommittee would actually work once we've nutted that out a bit more, which actually we intend to do fairly soon.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No, thank you for that. It's helpful. Christine.
Sorry, just as a further comment, I presume in the absence of that group operating for, I don't know what the time was, but it could be a short while in the past, that Environment Southland may have been picking up some of those responsibilities when they're actually come back to where they sit under the joint agreement, which will relieve Environment Southland of those responsibilities that they picked up in the absence of that occurring.
through you, Chair, just add, so the group's been meeting continually, but I think we just haven't really found our straps, is how I would put it. Yeah, so it's time for a good time for a reset and
And-
Through yourself, Chair, from the KEG group, as the chair of the KEG group, that'll be something that will feed through from a report from KEG in relation to the feedback from the operational group. So as they've all noted, if there's a decision that needs to come back through to this group, then we'll put it into that report. So we will get one drafted in relation to it. Time frame in relation to that, we need to give the operational team time to actually work through. I'd say it might be 2 meetings away rather than 1, but we'll go at speed. So we'll see if we can get it done by the next meeting. But I would caution on that. I'd say it's probably 2 meetings away at least.
I'm just going to also flag that with the emergency management bill moving through its natural cycle, that may also be a trigger for us here at a regional level to consider what is the outcome of that, what is the emergency management bill outcome, and does that trigger us to think about our current governance levels for the system, and does it trigger us, and is there a need for us to review that in any way? Because I guess we always want to make sure that we're achieving that balance of what is efficient in terms of governance and what is effective and resilient for an important function like this, and how does it align with that national direction if that national direction is changing. Does that make sense? I'm hoping I've explained that in a way that's understandable. But thank you for that update. Is there any other further questions on the action sheet as it currently stands? Okay, well, we'll go to agenda item, to the reports now, and agenda item 5.1 is the finance update. And just to flag before we speak about it, the recommendation on this one, it is recommended that the group resolve to receive the report. So I'm going to hand over to, is Lucy, will you lead discussion? Jodie's going to step forward to the table. Thank you, Jodie.
Thank you. So this is the same report that we presented to the previous meeting on the 6th of March. So following on from that, we are aware there's a few things requested from that meeting that we haven't fully finally actioned yet, but those are still in the pipework. So we are presenting the same report with updates expected in the near future. So basically, any questions?
Yeah, I see the previous report went to the KEG group and the KEG raised questions at that which have been unable to be responded to in terms of the time frame there. Rather than repeat or come up with the same questions, are you able to elaborate what the questions were?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the requests was a change in formatting on the report itself for the financials around the presentation so that it was adding through. Which is a simple change. It was just to make sure that we're consistent going forward. There was a request around the cash reserve balances being presented as well at each of these meetings so that the full picture is all presented at the exact same time. There was further requests around the breakdown of the support costs so that it was more in line with the joint venture agreement, so that we were actually putting it exactly into those same categories rather than how we've currently presented it. And as well as what was actually breaking down into each of those categories, specifically around the building maintenance and that type of expenditure that's going into this allocation. Then there was a follow-up that we were going to talk with amongst Patrick, the General Manager of Corporate Services, who's unfortunately away today, myself, Michael Day, and Cameron McIntosh as well, around getting together for a bit more of a meeting around other things that may be requested into that meeting, just to make sure that we've covered that off, in particular around the ongoing discussion of the generator invoices, to make sure that we're closing the loop on all of those actions.
That's helpful, thank you.
Just to clarify, that that KEG meeting, that was only last Friday, was that correct? So,
2 weeks, the 6th of March.
okay, yeah, right, gotcha. Thank you.
So others may have questions, but
Yeah.
I've got a couple more.
No, you carry on, Christine.
Just in relation to the current budget, I'm not aware, but we may have approved the current budget. Have we actually done that as a joint committee
The current budget for this
for this
financial.
financial year?
Okay, it's a good question. I'm a little bit unable to answer that. I have to. I'm assuming that it would have been approved in the lead up to the start of the financial year.
Through you, Chair, I think I'm scraping the barrels of my memory and I would need to double check the records, but I'm pretty sure it was tabled in March, approximately March last year. We tend to do it kind of a couple of months out before the start of the next financial year, but that is what is anticipated and supposed to happen, so that is what I assume happened, but I will need to check.
Okay, that's fine if you check that, because I meant to do it before I came, sorry, and I didn't have time. But then the next question is, well, what's happening in relation to the budget for the 26-27 year? Because if that was March last year, we haven't got in our meeting, and I'm not sure when the next meeting is.
May.
May.
Through you, Chair, it is something I am conscious of because it would also come with the 26-27 business plan.
Yes.
So that is something that I will be working on to present for the May meeting, which I do realise is a bit late. We will need to do a reset once Phil is on board, so that we line up discussions earlier, to make sure these things are in place, perhaps more November rather than March.
Yes, well, March would be fine, coming for the budget year, I would think, yeah.
Michael.
Through yourself, Chair, given the timing, and I haven't had a chance to relay this through to the team, that the May timeframe in relation to the councils and setting their budgets, etc., is late in relation to that through the annual plan processes. The very draft one has been sent through to myself, which I've indicated we need to have a chat at the May meeting in relation to the KEG. From perspective of the forward planning for the councils, I would recommend in relation to it that they hold as they currently are from that perspective, giving Phil the chance to actually review and analyse. It's highly likely we will need to look at the reserve status in relation to the current budgets to try and tide us over in relation to that period. So sadly, given the workflow in timing, it's likely that we'll be focused on an LTP in relation to budget adjustments, requirements, etc., if needed. So I'll work with the team in relation to how we get through this next financial period and annual plan cycle to try and hold it as we currently can.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions of Jodie or discussion on finance?
Sorry, just a comment. I appreciate that the KEG has identified some further questions, which I think some of us would have. So that's useful for that to come back and when we're discussing the budget for the ongoing year and take into account some of those responses. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Do I have someone who would be happy to move the motion, or and the recommendation is that we receive that report? Tom, thank you. Seconder for that one. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. It's with some, I'm going to use the word pleasure. I'm not sure if it's appropriate to use the word pleasure in response to emergency management, but it's with some pleasure that I turn to the next agenda item, 5.2, which is the group plan finalisation. And I say pleasure because this represents a little bit of a milestone, not a little bit, a significant milestone, I think, for the group. And from my read of the plan, in some respects, it might be considered aspirational, yet practical, but I think it will be something that we can use to hold ourselves to account in the future as we seek to strengthen and build resilience for our communities in Southland. But I'm going to hand over to Tracy to speak to this, and just note that the recommendation today is to receive the report on the group plan finalisation, and it's also to adopt the group plan as presented and submit it to the Minister of Civil Defence Emergency Management. And Tracy might explain how in this instance that that step's quite important to this process.
I was coming here, I don't know, excited is the word, relieved. This has been a 3.5 year process, but Mike just broke it to me minutes before this meeting that we're not quite there yet. I will point out a couple of things. As discussed at the workshop, that the working group was to go away and integrate all the changes that had been suggested from the NEMA technical review. We kept those highlighted changes, carried this through from the KEG just for transparency so that you had the chance to see the changes as well, but also noting that KEG were happy to put this forward for adoption. We have also included a foreword by Chair Phil Morrison and a mahi by Reverend Evelyn Cook as well. The recommendations do stand, but just for clarity, that I've just received from NEMA, the last paragraph where once it's formally adopted, the plan will be submitted to the Minister as the approved version. We should perhaps need to change the wording to submitted to the Minister as the adopted version for his comments. So while we have worked through the NEMA technical feedback, there is a final submission to give the Minister an opportunity to add any of his comments, and then it would come back to the Joint Committee for its final approval.
So just to clarify, it goes to the Minister, it's a thumbs up, and then we're in a position to approve it and at a Southland meeting.
Yep, that's exactly it.
Okay. So today we're not approving it, we're adopting it.
We are adopting it for it to be put forward, and once adopted, we will then take out all the highlighting, etc., and forward to the Minister.
Okay. And Mike, are you able to shed some light on the standard expectations around timelines for a Minister to have a chance to look at it? And
Great question. Yes, 20 working days.
okay.
Yep. And he or that team is pretty good at doing it within that time frame. So it'll come to, it's a formal process. The expectation is that there will be a letter from the Joint Committee Chair, from yourself, to the Minister, asking for his comments. It'll come to NEMA, we'll prepare advice for the Minister. And we've reviewed the process quite a lot over the last 2 years. And Tracy's done a great job engaging with NEMA on the technical review. So all the heavy lifting has been front-loaded into that process. So our expectation is that for the Minister's comments, it'll be a light touch because all the turning and froing has been done. 20 working days.
Wonderful, thank you. This is quite important, so I wouldn't want to quickly skip through this. So I really would encourage discussion and comments on this one. Tom, you've got some comment to offer?
Yeah, look, I would not have thought of asking this question a fortnight ago. But if I look at the definition of what is an emergency, which appears on page something in the report, page 38, I know that as we consider the impact of the Iran war and how that might affect not just the economy, but the ability to run, emergency services and so forth in the region. That sort of issue does not, I think, get covered by the definition that we have, which is taken from the Act. But I know that there has been discussions in the last few days, which has tended to use, I think, the vehicle of KEG and so forth, to consider how, as a region, we should be responding to that. So my question is whether we would envisage this sort of infrastructure as Joint Committee, KEG, Operating Committee, and so forth, to be the group which would be responsible for reacting and coordinating the response to that kind of emergency, which is, you maybe would describe it as a supply emergency, an economic emergency. that seems to fall outside, I think, the definition of the Act. So it was, I'm not quite sure, I was wanting to ask that question at this meeting, I wasn't quite sure where to ask it. Well, I will ask it now because it does relate to that question, you know, what is an emergency, which is fairly narrowly, I think, described as, you know, the sort of thing that causes risk to life and so forth. So we always think in terms of floods, tsunami, earthquake, and so forth. But does it include that kind of situation? I don't actually have a view. It's more, I'm actually just asking it as a question for.
Yeah, no, I think it's, thank you for asking a question, because you know, and curiosity is a positive thing, I think, in this instance. So I think Tracy's in a position to offer at least a first response.
Yes.
Initial response, I should say.
For clarity, actually, MBIE, they are the lead agency when it comes to energy situations such as this. The National Fuel Plan is a joint agreement between MB and NEMA, but at this stage, MB, you know, leading the situation, and I believe, though we don't have details of the content or the timing, that there's actually going to be an announcement today. For which we would be a bit wiser to the situation. I think the intention might be for MB to lead, but it has been recognised that perhaps the legislation, which is 1981, does not actually reflect, you know, what the situation is right now. The National Fuel Plan is largely is kind of based around what we do, you know, natural disaster type interruptions, same as the Southland Otago Fuel Plan. It's quite regionally based and doesn't really reflect if there was an international shortage. So if the National Fuel Plan then needs amended, then the Southland Otago Fuel Plan will also need amended. Within EMS, which I speak to later in the report actually, we actually do have a Southland Lifelines group. And so I'm the program manager of that, and that's all of the critical infrastructure, including the council team's critical infrastructure. And we actually had our meeting on Tuesday, and we did have Allied speak, and I gave a bit of an update. So for CDEN at the moment, it's kind of a watching brief to see what MB as the lead agency would move to do, recognising that, you know, when we had COVID, you know, health was the lead agency, but didn't necessarily have the legislation in place, and that's why it's a national state of emergency. It's recognised after the fact that perhaps that wasn't the correct way to go about it, so I think they're trying to front foot that this time and see if they can make the legislative changes they may need first, in the hopes that it doesn't devolve into a civil defence situation, if that helps at all. But yes, today there may be an announcement, and hopefully we know more from there for how much CDM may be required to act.
Thank you. Michael, you've also.
Yeah, through yourself, Chair. Look, I'm looking at trying to get some comms out. I was hoping to get it out yesterday, and apologies in relation to that to the wider group, but also through to all of the CARE members as well. Just on where we are in relation to that process, because in the phased plan, civil defence don't actually kick into gear until you get into a phase 2. So at this stage, unless government announces us to go into a phase 2, it's still sitting with MB perspective. We'll kick into gear from perspective of response component in a phase 2. We're always in preparedness stage. It's always good to be dusting off our plans, and that is the action that's being undertaken by the team, both within the operations, the KEG, and in the lifelines components, and in the councils themselves. So all councils are looking at theirs, and mine has been, these have been looking at ours right through to when we get to a phase 4 scenario. So that work is being undertaken in the background to feed through. And like I say, apologies, I hope to have got this email out last night. I'll try and get it out today.
I think through you, Chair. I mean, you made a critical question, which I think is appropriate for us to be thinking about as a group, or else in the Mural Forum, advised by us perhaps, is if not this group, then what? Mm-hmm. What is the group that does it? Because you don't want to leave a gap, right? Mm-hmm. And given the infrastructure that we already have, even if at operating level, it kind of works differently. The concept to this joint committee and the and KEG taking the lead would seem to me to be sensible. But I mean, obviously, you're already thinking a bit more than others. Thank you.
Grant, did you have a comment or
Yeah, comment probably, thanks, Chair. Reflecting on the previous agenda items and thinking through, we've still got work to do in our shop. I think to what's our primary function, and there are other government agencies that are planning around various other events, be it health, be it what the current situation is with energy and fuel. So, I think we need to be careful about trying to be all singing, all dancing to everything and everyone. My sense is, and I'm respectful when I make this comment, that we need to get our shop in order first, and I think there's still some work to do there. However, I do take the point that Tom's making around, I would sense if we look at this current situation, maybe it's a mural forum thing, that we make sure our community is well planned and the mural forum's connecting into the various agencies through MB and others, so that what does Southland's plan look like on a wider national plan. But I'd be concerned if we start to spread our thing and think everything that comes across the horizon falls into our waka. I think we've got to be laser focused on what our brief is from through legislation and get really good at that first. Be my comment.
So if I can just comment on that. The issue about the mural forum, of course, is it has no arms and legs.
Yeah.
And it's got no powers. It's a discussion group without any authority in any respect. So while it's a logical, peak lead, it has nobody to tell it to do anything. Right? So anyway, that's the.
In some respects, as I think of the nature of this particular challenge, I guess one observation is that it is not unique to Southland or Southland Otago. If we are going to be impacted by this, the entire nation will be impacted by this, and so it makes sense for us to maintain awareness of what's happening at a national level and how things are being managed and coordinated nationally, and then align with and conform to the guidance that's being received, given that how much trust and faith we place in our agencies in Central Wellington on this particular topic. Yeah. Are there any? Sorry, we kind of have focused on the potential fuel security issue here, which may have been a distraction from the agenda item, which is the group plan in entirety. Are there? But on either topic, is there further questions, Christine?
Thank you, Chair. Just in relation to the group plan.
Yep.
Focus. Appreciate there's been a lot of work occurring over
3.5 years.
3.5 years on this. So I do think we need to adopt and approve this today. I understand it's a live document anyway. So, for example, when we look at the review, which is on the discussion for later today, what the outcomes of that review may influence what is the content of this plan, and that will happen in the future as well. So just want to recognise the work that has gone into there and the opportunities that this committee has been provided on more than one occasion to read through this and comment that. And I know reading through it myself with the October event in mind, even then I can see that we need to think about some changes. But we'll never get through adopting or approving the plan if we wait for that to occur, and it makes sense to go through with the review prior to any further changes. So just want to commend the work that has been done to date, and Tracy has mentioned her relief, or could be described as other things to get to today. A bit of a minor letdown in terms of this further process to occur, but yeah, formally recognised. I'm happy to move actually.
Thank you. So you're happy to move that.
Second.
You second that, Tom. Is there any further discussion on this agenda item? On that basis, then I will just confirm that the recommendation number 1 was to receive the report. A slight amendment to recommendation number 2 is to it will be the adopted version of the Emergency Management Southland Group Plan as presented and submitted to the Minister of Civil Defence Emergency Management. So just making that very clear that it's the adopted version at this point of the journey. Okay, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you and congratulations, albeit knowing that there's still 2 steps to get through to completion. But thank you for your efforts on that, staff. It's very much appreciated, and I think you can take some satisfaction from this particular milestone today. Okay, I'm just refinding my place in my electronic copy of the agenda. Thank you. Okay, 5.3 is the workshop summary. And the recommendation is recommended that the group resolve to receive the report on the workshop summary. Tracy, you're going to speak to this one at this point?
Very briefly, I think the vast majority of people here were in the room on the workshop day. So I just thought I would pull together the last joint committee has clearly stated that we were to have a workshop. I thought it was best to formally include a paper to acknowledge that we did indeed have that workshop for any public interest, and just wrote in a bit of a summary, and happy to take any questions as well.
And maybe if I could just add some comment before we open up for discussion. The workshop was structured around, there was 2 kind of parts to the workshop. One was taking the opportunity to engage with some of our stakeholders as well as the organisations who are members of the group to look at some of the specific actions around the October wind event. And then in the after lunch session, we kind of zoomed it out a little bit. We broadened it to take a more holistic view of what are the nature of the challenges and the opportunities currently confronting the region in respect of emergency management coordination. So there's that sort of dual focus. As a workshop, we were never expecting a decision. Workshops are not convened for the purpose of achieving a decision. Again, I would comment that I found it incredibly helpful to stimulate that conversation, because when you're coordinating across a number of agencies, there is this risk of drift of expectations to emerge, and conversations that occurred at the workshop helped to mitigate against that potential for drift and to help to bring us back. And I wouldn't say when the workshop in and of itself achieved absolute 100% total alignment, but I think it was moving us in the appropriate direction towards that. So, and I do notice that later there is a public excluded item, which we will return to some of the specific insights from that workshop. Are there any comments or observations or questions, either from those who were at the workshop or folk who weren't able to be there and want to understand more about the workshop and the workshop process?
Thank you. A useful paper in providing a summary. I'm not sure in terms of the concern that was out there in the community. It identifies the key themes coming out of that discussion and actions ahead, given that we had stakeholders at that workshop and the level of public concern in our communities. So how do we, communicate with our ratepayers and communities that that discussion has occurred and the key things that were identified, given that, we're aware that power was cut, communications were cut, there was discussion about responses, our communities actually picking up and responding independently of EMS. There are a number of things of concern. So how is that illustrated back to our communities in this paper, and perhaps there's also a question about whether the workshop should be public excluded or not, given the detail is in that document.
No, thank you for that question, and I am not going to pretend that I have the answer, and I suspect that whatever the answer is, I suspect it may actually be different for the different communities, given the nature of Southland is arrayed and spread out geographically, and the council with obligations within their roadie. And so maybe I'd open it up to the floor for thoughts about how best to communicate with the community. Are we yet in a position that we want to just assure them that a workshop has occurred and there's a review and actions in process and it's in train and there's more information to come, or do we lift the hood on the full range of items that were highlighted? Yeah, so I'd welcome folks' thoughts on that particular need, the particular opportunity of communicating with our community on this topic. Grant?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I think certainly feedback to stakeholders is critical.
Yep.
And not just those that were in the room, but all those involved. Because I think they would benefit from seeing the fact that we're reflected on the response and perhaps some of the actions that are going to be taken. So certainly think stakeholders, and then that would percolate through community, would be my sense.
Thank you. Good points.
I think it would be a great advantage, especially for the community boards out in the Southland District area. It gives them a point of discussion. If it was on the agenda about how did our community really respond to it? What are our needs within our community? Are we correct? Are we up to speed? If not, then they can bring forward to the Southland District. Look, we need this, and this to sort us out.
So you're suggesting there might be potential to include it as an agenda item with community board meetings?
Well, absolutely, and I think I just look at the Matara one, for instance, and I think Nikki, who is the council representative, we're looking now very shortly at having one in Matara, because we haven't had one for quite a while. There's people come and go.
Yep. Other thoughts? And one of the questions that emerges to me is, I think that's very valid and would be incredibly useful. I know there's resource implications of people's time, attention on that topic, but in this case, it's probably justified. One of the questions that emerges for me is that sufficient? Does that provide sufficient cover? Because I know there are folk who are intensely engaged through the community board process, and there's others who may be quite oblivious to conversations that occur at that level. Is there a wider communication need on this topic?
I'm just probably not even clear on myself who are our stakeholders.
Yeah.
And I would think, community boards are a stakeholder in this. And if we haven't got the definition of our stakeholders clear, then we risk missing groups as well. For example, I guess Southland District Council has been encouraging discussion, and it's probably, part of that group plan document, that rather than community response plans, that the community boards take responsibility for this area. And so how does that occur, and what is the relationship with emergency management systems? Do we do it on our own? An understanding of what the role of, I think Tracy identified the role of EMS is to facilitate these groups. The group plan talks about development, and if we're not clear about what that looks like, we probably need to be. And that's not going to be a quick discussion, and that will probably come out of the review. But there's certainly, speaking from Southland District Council and our community boards, they're still speaking of concern about if there's an event tomorrow, what's different. And so that's why I guess I'm encouraging this and supported by discussion. You know, our community boards need to know, but and Cable City Council may have a view on how that's disseminated to stakeholders, how they're involved in this. I don't think the answer will be today, but we need to think about that, given the level of concern and understanding what will be different. If an event occurred tomorrow, what do we need to be doing immediately to make changes?
And perhaps following on from that line of thinking, Christine, would there be an appetite at a community board level and a council level, once the group plan is returned from the minister and approved by this group, perhaps to, in an attempt to kill two birds with one stone, speak to council and or community boards, providing an overview of the group plan as well as providing an overview of the, if you like, a stock take of the current vulnerabilities and opportunities of our system? Would you think that might be a helpful approach to consider moving forward? And it's just I'm kind of thinking out loud on this topic, but based on what I'm hearing around the table, because the group plan, once it's approved, is also, I think, something that will be of a resource of utility to communities. I'm happy for people to tell me that's a dumb idea, Phil. Don't go there.
So I think the group plan is a foundation document, and it would be good, you know, for example, our community boards to understand that. They may not have a strong connection with it. Not that I've ever asked, so I could be entirely wrong there. But I think there would be interest in what is the pragmatic response of this group to future events, given the level of concerns that were expressed in October, and that the same things could happen tomorrow, that power is down, communication is down, etc. And so what has changed in the immediate short term, long term from that event? And appreciate that will require, I think, from Southland District Councils, a full review rather than just a technical review of what occurred, given that we look at that back in 2023 and had a similar level of concerns. And it exposes, I think, us as a council to considerable risk in terms of response to future events, and that we need to be managing that as a council and as in the relationship with EMS as well.
Through yourself, Chair, trying to feed out and listen to what was being asked and from a civil defence side of it in relation to that conversation, because there's two parts to the workshop and the feedback, and a lot of the concerns and challenges that came from the event came about network availability side of it, as well as some of the comments in relation to a response side of it. The group plan indicates the direction in relation to it, improvements around it from a civil defence, being able to be responsive and educate, etc. That's in the group plan, but it doesn't address, I think, what is being highlighted in relation to some of the core exposure in relation to our lifelines aspects, which the awareness comes through lifelines, but it's an awareness and a communications role that the EMS and civil defence play at the moment. Some of those were highlighted that we've got some challenges in those networks, and they talked about what they were looking at in relation to that, but also their supply chain, for example, was seen as critical points. Our challenges is what role does civil defence have in relation to that communication, as opposed to those individual lifelines? Are we crossing over into their information, their networks? We should definitely have an awareness in relation to it. Some of that could be quite sensitive from their perspective. I'm just it's something to mull through and work through, because I hear the concerns. Some can be worked through from council's perspectives as one of the networks associated to that, but when you start getting into power, comms, I can think of a number of other networks that we could look at. We probably need to work through the lifelines work and see what can we communicate, what can't we communicate in relation to that, and try and get a clear messaging through lifelines. I think that's the key avenue to try and address some of those concerns. The rest of it, I hope, is addressed in the group plan in relation to forward comms, communications in relation to them. And I really support getting out and talking to the community boards about that plan and what it means and how to be involved, the re-education components.
Within that, I see perhaps a third opportunity, and I always like to kill not only 2 but 3 birds with 1 stone, and that might be with Phil Mackay arriving, an opportunity for him to also be introduced to councils and community boards in the process, and a chance for him to start the journey of getting around the province and meeting and seeing and understanding, and also at the same time hearing some concerns that might inform his thinking and accelerate his orientation to the challenges and opportunities within the region. I guess what I'm kind of hearing is perhaps for us to formulate an approach as to how to increase the communication in the months ahead with councils and community boards around the group plan, follow on from recent events, and to introduce the new emergency manager.
Chair, I kind of heard 2 things, so clarification would be good. I had a more immediate need and a longer term need. So the group plan in my mind is the longer term, socializing the group plan. What does it say, the improvements it's looking at and that side of things. But there is the element that Christine mentioned of we've had an event, there were concerns, we've had a workshop. What are we saying was the outcome of that? So that bit, I'm not sure you can put it to the group plan and say the outcome of what we discussed were the concerns are a group plan matter which has been in production for the last 3 years.
Yeah.
So there has to be some sort of a communication about here are the main concerns, this is what we think we are going to do about it, or we haven't, here are the concerns, at least that's out there, and that we intend to do something about it in whatever time frame or through this process is what I was kind of hearing. I was hearing 2 things.
I would observe that what emerged for me at the workshop was an understanding of some of those concerns that were triggered by the October wind event. But I would also acknowledge and recognise there's a set of insights and remedies or mitigations or capability builds that have been identified from previous events that we have not yet fully had a chance to respond to. And we need to, I think, integrate both sets of concerns. Some of them are the same concerns. Some of the things we've identified from the October wind event were actually, that is no surprise, we knew that was a vulnerability or criticality because that's been identified from previous events. We just haven't yet found the way forward to respond to that fully and effectively. So my observation would be, I fully agree that we need to consider how we communicate and be honest and transparent about where we have strengths, where we may be carrying risk. And I think we need to understand that this is not an outcome of a single windy 24-hour period in Southland, but it's connects to a system overview.
Yeah, hi. Being fairly new to this group as only being elected in the last elections, coming into the workshop that we went to really fresh, and having been a victim of the storm myself, having no power rurally and being quite isolated and having neighbours that were isolated and stuff, I found the workshop extremely enlightening, that we brought together all the stakeholders like the power company and the FEMS and the fire and the police and everything like that. So potentially for putting it out there to the public and to the ratepayers and stuff that we are working behind in the background, why not a joint public statement to say the main concerns from that workshop and all the good stuff that did come out of that workshop, like the power company realising that they needed generators and they needed to get them on the ground ASAP and all the different things. Like it could be more of a group media release. I don't know if that's appropriate or not, but for me, I learned so much at that workshop, and I've been able to tell people that have asked me what's come out from the storm from this committee. Then maybe just something like that would be appropriate. But I could be completely wrong because I'm a newbie. So
Yeah, no, but thank you. Before I comment.
Through Mr. Chair, like similar comments. What I've written down was what I'm hearing too is the immediate needs are how can we find those strengths and improvements that I think we collectively all see through our own stakeholder groups, our own responsibilities, and who we individually represent, but we openly and transparently discuss that collectively. I think that's the key part that I think our communities and all stakeholders, but I also made a note too, I think, and to your point too, I think, Christine, I think it's known informal stakeholders such as our telcos and power companies through things like lifelines, which might be known within the system in this group, but to our community, we need to again use quite language and straightforward comms to make sure that they understand that. But then also what we've heard in that workshop, and I think we all agree we want to strengthen, is where stakeholders that may not have been identified, but a community identified stakeholders that feel like stakeholders have to be heard as well. So I think that is the piece that I see as a responsibility of this joint committee. And there's plenty of other work about responsibilities and group plan going forward.
I think the responsibility of this committee is to ensure that we understand what went well and what did not go well. And then to determine what we need to do to make sure it goes better next time. I think you got to watch though. You've got to be careful that when you invite stakeholders into what is effectively a public exclusive meeting, and you have them speaking completely frankly, therefore about shortcomings in your organisation. You cannot then publish that, right? That's so just to publish the download that we got from people would be inappropriate in our view. We do have to publish, I think, the results of what you call a technical review or whatever it's called. The results of that certainly should be public. But I would stop short at just publishing the 5 or 6 pages of what Kernet said. That was not said with the intention that people were going to then it was going to be published.
Thank you. That's very valid. I mean, there was very raw and non-curated record captured for the purposes of informing our further analysis. But as I say, that was never, I think, the intention of those who attended, that what the insights they shared would be captured and disseminated in a raw and uncurated, untriaged form. But still, I think there was an opportunity around in communication, updating our communities, one that the workshop has occurred, that there's a number of valuable insights emerged from it, and there's this commitment regionally to continue collaborating on building a stronger, more resilient system. And I would,
as a review,
and
the results of that review will be published. I mean, I think that's
preempting that agenda item, which is yet to come, but it connects to that agenda item. So. I'm going to take the action point from here is for us to develop an appropriate communication approach in support of our continuing analysis and strengthening of our system. Are people comfortable if we took that as an action from this discussion?
Is there a time frame around that happening? What's available?
I would see it being graduated. I think there's going to be communication opportunities around the engagement of when our new emergency manager starts. But I would want to get something out ahead of that in the next 3 to 3 weeks. I reckon would be an appropriate time frame to perhaps do that. I'm just wondering to what degree do the various people around this table want to have input or oversight of that communication. Because we can share it and share drafts of communication and for people to comment on ahead of it going out. Or we can delegate
Where does
it.
the communication come from?
I'm imagining in my mind that's an obligation of whoever sits.
The joint committee?
Yeah. So I can certainly share it with all of those governance representatives that sit around the table today ahead of it going up. If you think it's appropriate, and I imagine the straw man version of it when it's first developed, I would expect and want to be challenged on it and suggestions offered as to how it might be tailored or even tailored for slightly different council audiences. If there was a Gore had a particular need that was different in some way to Invercargill, then so be it. We'll have a generic one.
I think the chair, if it's come from the joint committee, it goes out under the joint committee's name and probably, under your name as the chair. I think if it's going out as a joint committee, then we do need to see it before it gets published. So I think you circulate it.
Yep.
I don't think we need to, be doing a, detailed sort of grammatical, correct. But I mean, let's just see it so that we know what's going to do.
Okay.
Yes.
I think it's very sensible and achievable. So I will take the lead on developing the draft of that, and we'll share it with the governance and look forward to feedback on that. And thank you for raising this, and thank you for communicating the different ways of responding. I think it's very helpful.
Sorry, just thank you. I appreciate Mayor Campbell's response in terms of the download and expectations or understandings at that workshop. So I think that's reasonable, and I guess the other comment I would make is that I think as Southland District Council we are meeting with the chairs of our community boards. I can't remember the date offhand soon, so we can advise the community boards that that's the intention from this meeting, and there'll be that communication will happen in the near future. So it moves it, I think, from this summary to indicate there is an action occurring. Bearing in mind that we're looking at what Northland and further north is suffering right now, so there's no guarantees about what will happen or not happen in the near future. So that's good.
Certainly, from my point of view, I would prioritise this as a task for myself to get that draft out there as soon as we possibly can to elicit some feedback and comments. So thank you. So therefore, I think what I take then from the recommendation is to receive the report, and perhaps the second or recommendation is to develop a communications update for community and councils. People comfortable with that second element to the recommendation? You're happy to? So Tom's moved it, and we've got a second. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. That brings us to agenda item 5.4, operational update. Tracy, once again in the hot seat.
This is actually quite a lengthy report, to be fair. This is actually a general update on operationally what we do, but I will note to emphasise this report is generated for the quarter October to December, and that we were mostly in responsible recovery for that. So what was also achieved on top of that was quite well done for such a small team. A couple of things I did want to draw attention to, which we talked about briefly before. I've recognised the Regional Lifelines group hasn't been reported on consistently or well, probably for some time. So I just entered an introduction so that there was an understanding legislatively that Lifelines do have a responsibility under the CDM Act, and that actually also to note local councils do too, and being that councils also carry critical infrastructure, it's sort of a twofer for around this table, and that the Lifelines group has at least been meeting consistently, even if we haven't been reporting on it, and is made up of many critical infrastructure members around Southland. There is a list in the Act as well as our local plans of who is to attend, and we do have quite consistent attendance, the likes of Southport, and then there's also agencies that unfortunately don't have offices down here, say like Transpower, their representatives in Christchurch, so they can only physically come periodically. We haven't always provided online options, but I will be intending to do so moving forwards to ensure a bit of a better participation. And post-wind event, we've had a few new additions too, such as the TCF, Telecommunications Forum, the sector coordinating entity for the telecoms. We don't necessarily have, and across New Zealand for all Lifelines Group, it's not just a Southland thing, a representative from each of One and Spark and but TCF as the coordinating entity is endeavouring to attend everyone's lifelines and to be able to disseminate down to those members. Have note some attendance is a bit haphazard, and for example, of the 4 councils, we only had 2 in attendance at the meeting this week, and one that was in attendance, we only had 1 staff member when there could have been 3 or 4 across the various critical infrastructures. Part of that meeting is obviously about working collectively, making sure we have good communication systems in place, but also the planning part for us to be prepared. And for example, the fuel situation, while not CDM-led, we do still have it front of mind because we also have to consider contingency planning if there was another event as well as. So I guess I will be reporting to both KEG and Joint Committee on attendance, but highlighted would be council attendance too, that it's very important for you to advocate for the members to be at these meetings so they understand what the wider critical infrastructure groups are working towards together. And then the other part that I was introducing as well is the Fiordland has a working group in supporting operational groups. Fiordland has a working group, has actually been in place for quite some time and has had a variety of members, but not necessarily in a well-formed process. And so I identified there was probably some members missing that should really be involved. But I have noticed over the years I've been here, Fiordland has a working group has always kind of devolved to just Milford and the rest of Fiordland was sort of missing out. And we identified sort of key themes in the last 18 months of isolation, evacuation and maritime being the key issues. And we have actually created fairly recently, just sort of mid last year onwards, operational groups that are geographically set. So there's a Milford specific operational group. Those are the people that are going to be there on the day and something goes wrong. And in the potential event that we're not going to have any communications with them, what are they going to do to look after themselves, all the tourists that may be in there at the time, at Milford Inc. community. So we're trying to do some pre-planning with these organisations so that they, are empowered to act rather than waiting for us to, fly in over the hill just in case it's not a Milford specific event and we have a whole of Southland and it may take a little bit of time for us to get there. We're also going to have a Tianao and Manapuri joint group. The Milford one I should show too, there's only FENZ as a responding agency based in Milford. There's no EMS, there's no DOC, and the FENZ members are volunteers, so they don't necessarily always have a response team available. So lots of the actions are actually going to be performed by tourism operators. And do they actually know that? 17-year-old going in there being a kayaking guide for the summer, it's all fun and well. Do they realise they may then end up responsible for someone in a very serious situation? The Tianao group, we've concentrated specifically on the emergency services, and that is both to do a bit of Tianao planning, but also understanding that they will be supporting, as they did in the 2020 floods, will be supporting Milford, Doubtful Sound, the wider Fiordland region as the base with the medical centre, supermarket, somewhere we may need to evacuate people to initially. And then there will be it got windy before I got the remote group off the ground. That is essentially everyone else that is not Milford Sound or Te Anau in the Fiordland Basin. I'm very conscious of the fact, while we do share weather warnings, etc., with Doubtful Sound, they are also vulnerable. They have tourists in there, and we have Deep Cove Hostel in there where school children, frequently on school camp. So we want to increase the readiness within these small operational groups, recognising because of them, they're tourist operators. What is their legal mandate? Not much. And do a bit of a gap analysis. If it's going to take 6 hours for FENS to actually get a team from Invercargill, we need to acknowledge that. And so that those up there are aware that you can't depend necessarily on a volunteer organisation that may or may not have members available. And that's just the truth of it. But I think there's an impression that all of us are going to all of a sudden appear, all the responding agencies, and that unfortunately is not necessarily the case in a large scale event such as the Alpine Fold. So we've only had, say, 3 meetings for the Milford group, 2 for the Te Anau group. So at this stage, it's sort of forming membership, making sure we're getting the right people along at the right level. It's not only who's got the, who will be acting on the day, but also the involvement of what can they put into their own business plans for the health and safety, wider health and safety of responding during a hazard event, not just the Health and Safety Act. On top of that, the Sustainable Milford project that's followed on from MOP. That is chaired by the Director General of DOC. They have taken also great interest in what work is being done in there, and I'll be speaking at their board meeting next week, and they would just like to know essentially what is being done and how can they support this and how can they help carry things along as well. But those 2 things specifically. Talking about community boards, we actually did have mentioned one of the actions. Mayor Scott spoke of increasing training for elected members. We have, and again, this report's October to December, so we only mentioned the first Mayor's training. We have completed, the second Mayor's training for all of you that came to the second session. And the EMS team has actively been booking in community boards to go out and for the new training to go out and who we are and what we do and what are your hazards conversations. So we've already attended a few. Maddie and I were at Waihopai Toitoi this last week, and we have a few more booked in as well that we were trying to get them within the first 6 months if we could. We do have ICC councillors booked in as well, and then we will work with the rest of the councillors to get the other councillors and ELT sessions booked in too. And then lastly, another action that was noted, I should draw attention to, is the building update. Hopefully you've all read that section. The initial inspection was done. There's still some more minor remedial items that have been previously overlooked. They will be tended to next week. So I can bring back to the group that when everything is 100% completed, that the jobs have been finished to account for that last particular action. Anything else? I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Tracy. I'm going to ask just the first question. Under the Southland Lifelines, Regional Lifelines group, you've identified priorities for 2026. 3 bullet points there, and that's on page 133. They do seem as if they might be a little bit influenced by recent experience, those particular.
I'll say yes and no. They were already known.
Yeah.
They were, however, emphasised during the most recent response. While there is legislative requirements of critical infrastructure, as with many of our other groups, including the operational groups in Milford, civil defence, I'll say, doesn't have teeth until we're in a state of emergency and have powers enacted. So the vast majority of this work is done on relationships and goodwill and organisations voluntarily taking part. So I can't make critical infrastructure show up, and I can't make them provide their communications plans, etc. But the event did certainly help the group see how essential these key priorities are.
Thank you. Other questions for Tracy on this report? Okay.
So just in relation to the questions you're raising, in regard to Fiordland and that working group that's there. I guess it raises for me a question around, there's been a lot of work over the years and focus on AF8, and I'm thinking, how are these questions arising when all that work's occurred AF8, which could have happened, years ago, or could happen tomorrow. Yet we've got this level of questioning around, for example, how tourists are removed from the area, knowing that, of course, that there was in 2023, I think it was, the action where that needed to occur. So, and also, I guess, for the opportunity for the preparedness around AF8 to transfer into our response if there is an event, so that we're not sort of doing it twice. But yes, I just thought the level of questions and the work around AF8, why does that mean that we still have these level of questions? Does that mean as a group we need to further consider that? Will we wait to the event, or what is?
Through you, Chair, AF8 is a program for all 6 South Island groups. So it's they've got the safer framework, which is a few years dated now, and discussions will be had with the steering group if there would be a second framework too. They've just come to the end of their first strategy and working towards what the next strategy will look like for the next 5-10 years. It is largely, I guess, an overview document for the 6 regions collectively. These operational groups are on the day, on the ground. I'm looking you in the eye. We've got to run from a tsunami. Where are we going? So the AF8 program does not go down to that granular detail within each region. It is looking at the whole response for South Island and what key, say key infrastructure like road closures, etc., may look like. But for the people that actually work in there, same as a fire evacuation plan, where do we go to leave the building? They need to know the physical actions within the organisations that they're taking, and then how they're coming together as a community. So the AF8 work, that wasn't within their scope.
Tracy, would it be fair to say, and I'm just imagining my understanding of the tourism sector is there's quite a lot of churn in their workforce. And I would imagine that part of the challenge in places where tourism is a big part of the economy is that there's kind of a need for continued investment to maintain awareness of and sets of capabilities to respond to these kind of things. I'm imagining that's one of the influences at play in places like Milford.
Seasonal turnover of staff. I'll mention another piece that's not actually noted in here. There is a research project for which EMS is very involved with DOC, Milford Sound Tourism, etc. 6-stage process. Stage 0 essentially was about communications. Stage 1A, which I've just received the research for, quite a meaty read, is how do we communicate risk? And to the different types of groups, how do you communicate it to the tourists that are just getting on a nice warm bus to go on a nice warm boat and leave again, all the way to the workers that are staying in there for multiple days. And essentially it's all going to work together. There's the Te Anau and Manapori community response groups as well. So there's those groups, the working groups. Fiordland Hazard is kind of the governance layer now. So if any of those working groups identify, say, gaps in capability or capacity, the idea is that gets elevated to the Fiordland Hazard working group to see if it then can be covered regionally within the organisations. And Fens would be an example. We can't promise Milford Fens, but regionally, can we promise Te Anau Fens would respond? If not, it then gets escalated to a regional or higher level, say like sort of DOC, that nationally they're taking an interest in this. But the risk communication strategy, it's just about finished. We're hoping to have it finished, and that's been a collective of all the communication staff for mini tourism operators, DOC, SDC, like a collective of organisations of how we're going to communicate this risk. And that will also go alongside trying to do operational planning. Part of that risk strategy, which is the end piece, once that it is agreed upon, is building modules, training modules for the staff members. It'll be a login process so that we can account for who's actually watched it, but that any organisation can approach EMS for that, and that is to build on the once a year we go in there due to the staff turnover to do an induction every year with all the new staff. And each year I've been in there for the last 5 years, I'd say I've got at least 30 to 2/3 of the room is new every year. So it is a continuing piece of work in a couple of different directions. The communications piece, will be very happy to get out. I'm also organising workshops to get that socialised with all the stakeholders that would be interested between Milford, Te Anau and head office bases in Queenstown, etc. And then the next part of that, which Nima and Doc are just about to sign off on, is actually doing the hydrodynamic modelling in there for us to understand the risk better. And then there will be workshops following that to then explain the science to everyone that's interested, to have a better understanding of the risk. There's a lot of work that's been done in there, as you say, over the years, but we haven't actually utilised the science that's available now, such as LiDAR. So there's a lot of moving parts to the whole Milford project.
Okay, thank you.
Lucy.
Just quickly through you, Chair, I think just back to slightly to the AF8 questions. The AF8 program was kind of, when it first got set up, had 3 kind of main chunky pillars of work. The first part was around that increase in modelling and research and understanding of the impact of what would actually happen if there was a magnitude 8 incident. The second part was that coordinated response planning, which what Tracy has just talked about in terms of that inter-region planning. And the third really hefty part was in engagement with the community in terms of turning that technical science and research into tangible, understandable, sometimes terrifyingly clear communication, so that people were taking ownership and preparing for what they needed to prepare for. I think that the AF8 program is, as Tracy said, it's come to the sort of the end of its first strategy and is looking for where to next. And I know that conversations I've been party to whilst holding the couple of hats, the group managers are very clear on how do they ensure that that region and pan-regional planning is filtering down, and how does it connect to the local level plans that we all have. So Alice, the program manager, has got that in her sights, and they've been working very closely over the last probably quarter to 6 months to articulate the next phase for AF8. So I just wanted to be really clear about what it was intended to do and how there's all of these pieces. I think the second point I'd make is we had intended to get Alice to come and meet you all and to do a kind of induction AF8 101, kind of what is it and what's in the programme and how is it delivering. And then the storm happened, and so we didn't get to it. So I think we should put that back on the list of things to do. She would be good to come in person and present, and you can kind of get a bit under the hood and have a look at what the AF8 programme has been doing and what the outputs have been, how we've been using them, and then help to maybe give her a bit of clarity about where to next. So those are just...
Thank you. That's helpful. Other questions for Tracy on the report? If not, I'm happy to move that we accept that report with some procedure. Thank you, Tom. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. And thank you, Tracy, for that. Next up is 5.5 Mana Whenua report. And Angie.
Kia koutou. As always, a pleasure to come and report to this group, and I'll take the report as read and take any questions if anything specifically is of interest or you want me to dive in deeper. But yes, just an overview of, I guess, what myself supported by the advisory. So I just will take this opportunity too to just, because there are some new faces around the table, to remind, to let you know that when this pilot role was in place from January 24 to January 26, and it was placed at Te Amarama, we were very clear, both from feedback from Karunaka of Mirahiku's position, but also through the conversations within EMS, that
we would set up an advisory as well. So we've seen it play out today. So even though so around this table, Reverend Evelyn Cook has been the Kaitahuki Mirahiku representative here in governance, we formally made sure that we had alternates, which also were the people who were supporting this role to really tangibly across all layers and levels and work, make sure that we were connecting ourselves, but making it really clear and being able to contribute our skills and expertise and mahi that we're doing into all layers and levels of the group. So just that's a good reminder for those who may not have known that. Yeah, so it's certainly not just me doing this mahi. There is plenty of people supporting myself through Te Ao Marama and the Papati Birinaka and Mātāwaka entities within Mirahiku. So yeah, if there's any questions to any specifics, I'm more than happy to answer them.
Thank you. Tom?
It wasn't specific, but just picking up on something you said just before. So how are Mātāwaka engaged?
In regards to this pilot, we've been testing different ways and there's already relationships between all of us. So Mātāwaka have strong, they stand on their own mana and they're doing heaps of awesome work. And just because we're Southland and because we do things, there's a lot of relationships there anyway. Through my role, what I have tried to, and it's been very clear from myself as well, but through my advisory, is we've been very clear to our Mātāwaka, whether it's through the marae mainly, is the main point, but to any other entities that might be led by Mātāwaka, is that even though it's Ngāi Tahuki Mirahiku leading in this space, in this role, that we are here to bring your voice to the appropriate space and place if you haven't found a landing space for your voice. So it's just been through relationships. Like a lot of things over this 2 years, that 2 years has disappeared really quick, and considering how many either declarations or monitoring or, yeah, we certainly haven't got to the depth of that both with Runaka and Mātāwaka Marae, but yeah, so I guess I've just been facilitating. I take that part of my role as the most important, facilitating relationships and conversations to there. So also TPK, Te Puni Whokari, they do have some legislative mandate for iwi Māori. So I've been connecting with the TPK team as well, because we're not really, nobody wants to have duplicative effort. So yeah, we've just really been using this pilot to see how that is working. Yeah, and so and some tangible outcomes of that, I guess, is through the project with TPK and Te Runanga or Ngāi Tahu office based in Christchurch when the airport rollout was. So they didn't just go to Ngāi Tahu Marae, out of Matoda there is also that there. But the connection then of where I can help facilitate that, and I did catch up with Nick when we first met, was to say, hey, either I can get out of the way and just connect people in, or I can help facilitate either whether it's training or support to support both the marae and the resources available, but also the connection into community that is led by the marae and Mātāwaka themselves, but can be supported by roles like this. So that answers the question.
Given this has been a pilot, what are your aspirations or that you see as opportunities for the future based on your experience today?
Yes, okay. Look, there's many, and I'll try not to get into my detailed brain.
Three would be probably.
Look, I'm going to obviously be biased, but the aspirations is for us to just recognise that it's worked, and that has become. I can quite strongly say that based on all the feedback that I've received, not just personally, but through advisory or through Te Ao Marama or through people in this room from all angles. So I think that's the main thing is, and I want to thank everybody and just a wider community, because we have strong partnerships collectively between agencies, between iwi Māori, between our rural sector and our urban communities. Southland does Southland well. We care about one another. So I think we need to lean into that rather than we connect into, and Ian Bill was a great example, we connect into, and part of my role has been trying to connect into different examples in the national frameworks as well. But one of the feedback is I've recognised, and I think we kind of already know that, we are way ahead of the game in some other regions, some other groups, with tangible outcomes to our dreams. So yeah, it's not specific, but that's the absolute clear imperative for me. How that looks, etc. I know there's conversations, and that's where I can definitely provide details. But yeah, mainly that. Probably the only other thing too is I think, you know, I'm sitting from a mana whenua perspective or an iwi Māori perspective, but I think this rings true everywhere, is just that continued, I'd encourage us to continue to find opportunities where responsibilities lie in your specific council's area or as a group. We don't want to ignore that, but let's challenge and look at how we can release the pen to an entity or an organisation or a group who can actually get that done quickly and effectively. We're still meeting our obligations, but we're allowing somebody else to lead it. I think this is a great example of that. We don't always have to have the ultimate control, but we just have the responsibility of guidance. And I think this has been a great example of that. And really the intent of why I roll it, this was put in. So,
Thank you for those, sharing those thoughts and insights. Are there other questions for Angie on this report? Someone happy to move that we accept and receive that report? Neville and Ricky seconding that one. So, all in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. That brings us to agenda item 6.1. And we will be receiving a report, the National Emergency Management Agency update. And I will just note that, Mike, you may have to leave us around midday. So keeping a weather eye on the clock, we're still on schedule for you to deliver this update. So thank you.
Yeah, through the chair, I'm just happy to take the report as read and answer any questions that you may have. I think because most of it in there is probably familiar to most of you.
Do the time for the emergency management bill, those timelines, when do you see us being in a position in Southland with some certainty to have discussions around the implications of the new system or an updated system?
Would definitely be up to the 9th of June. We would have to wait until the select committee reported back into Parliament, and I imagine that there would be some specific engagement with joint committee and key chairs on that, but that hasn't been timetabled in as far as I'm.
But it's certainly going to be attended to before government, before Parliament dissolves.
I imagine it would be, yes, yeah, but there's been no engagement signal to me.
Okay, thank you. Other questions for Mike on this report? It's been a busy time for NEMA, continuing to be busy.
Incredibly busy, and I was just looking at the report here, that mayoral or disaster relief funds with the recent events up in Northland, severe impacts up there. That's already been raised and discussed, and there's a real need out there for funds such as this. But I would kind of reiterate it's as well as contribution to an existing fund. And one of the things we're looking at up in Northland today is making sure we're engaging with governance, mayors during the event around establishing that fund and inviting contributions from other agencies, not necessarily agencies, but philanthropics and businesses and what have you. Yeah, there's quite a heavy demand on it.
Will there be utility in your new manager national operations having a visit to Southland at some point in the future?
I imagine he will get around the regions and introduce himself.
A bit quieter. And,
yeah, totally. Have you met him before, Mark Crowe?
I've not met him.
No.
I think we would welcome the opportunity to host him for a visit down here if he was in a position to come south.
Yes, no, that will be on his program to do some engagement down here.
Any other questions for Mike then? On that basis, someone happy to move that we accept that update, accept the report? Christine, thank you, and Grant, seconding. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Thank you, carried. This brings us to agenda item 7, public excluded business, and the intention is to now move to public excluded. The reasons or justification for doing so.
Set out on page 144 is for the confirmation of public excluded minutes of the Southland Civil Defence Emergency Management Group, and to deal with the item 8 Emergency Management Southland Governance Workshop Review. The reasons are protect privacy of natural persons and to carry on without prejudice or disadvantage negotiations, section 7.2a and section 7.2b.
Thank you. So I'm going to move that we go to public excluded. Is someone happy to second that? Tom, thank you. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I just had a question. Just to carry on without prejudice or disadvantage negotiations, commercial industrial negotiations.
Well, not commercial and industrial, but that it's any negotiations amongst the parties, but it also encompasses commercial and industrial if that's appropriate to the purpose.
Okay, yes, I was unsure about that. I'm certainly happy to go into excluded on the basis of the discussion at the earlier meeting that stakeholders were present at that workshop to on the basis it was a free and frank conversation.
Thank you. So I think we just vote on that.
Put the resolution.
Put the resolution. So all in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. So we'll now just make sure we're in public excluded by moving off the live stream. And Mike, you're going to head for the airport to
I'm
miss that flight.